Teachers, I hope you're listening today. Substitute teachers need your feedback. Let's tell you what we would like to hear.
Substitute Teachers Lounge.
All right, guys, there is a bunch of different ways we can go on this topic, but basically, substitute teachers really would like to have the feedback of the teachers. Now, I've never really run into teachers that look down on substitute teachers. I've never had that experience. I hate it if some of you guys have felt that. But based on a listener email that I got this week, we're going to base our episode today on feedback. We're going to let teachers, hopefully there's some out there listening to us right now, and just kind of give you a feel for where we're coming from. You know, we just want to feel needed. I will say this about categories I could put teachers in. The first two I mentioned will be a little bit on the negative side, not that I've really experienced it that much, and it's a very small percentage of teachers who are like this, but there's some teachers out there that would probably never give us feedback. There's also the category that I would just call it shallow feedback. They know we're expecting to hear something, so maybe they just say the same thing they say to every substitute teacher. We can really tell when you're giving us that because you're not really looking us in the face. You're grading your papers. You're showing us that you're busy, and you are busy, and you're just going through the motions of providing feedback. Now, those first two groups are definitely the smallest, the minorities, the smallest groups of teachers. The majority are really good at leaving feedback. Guys, we'll tell you, for the teachers listening out there, what we would like to hear. I'm going to base my comments on the email I got from Mr. S. I'll call him Mr. S. I know he was a retired military. Thank you for your service. And he's a high school teacher, and he has some ideas for feedback. Let's listen to what he has to say. Greetings, love your podcast. I'm strictly a high school sub for the past 5 years. Retired military, retired business professional. Any thoughts of doing something related to the lack of sub feedback? Of course, getting called back repeatedly is feedback, but I feel the area could be enhanced. Further, I would be looking for constructive feedback. What could I have done better? Perhaps many teachers are reluctant to give constructive feedback. I'm looking for ideas on how that reluctance can be minimized, perhaps through a generic feedback form. We'll get into that. And then he asked, what thoughts do we have? So let's talk about feedback the rest of the show. Again, the majority, I feel, teachers will give meaningful feedback. Something that we have to keep in mind, and this is true of life in general, and then I'll share a story with you in that regard. There are some schools that have their list of substitutes, and it's hard to break through that list. I have one school in my mind. I won't give the name, of course, because it's going to start out negative and end positive. A couple of times I would accept through SubAlert or any kind of app that you use that helps in that regard. I would see the substitute position. I would accept it. It would tell me that I was down. Couple of times this happened. I would schedule it the night before. I'd go to bed knowing I had that job, get up in the morning, get ready, and it says that job has been removed. In fact, there was one time when I picked up for this school that morning, and on the way driving to the school, I got the message that the job has been removed. Now, here's the true thing about life. Schools have their favorites. They have their list of subs that they like to use. And that's fair, man. That's the way life works. We all do that. It doesn't matter what we're involved with. we're always going to go to our favorite subs when we need a sub. You can say that in the classroom. Let's face it. You don't have favorite students, but yet there are students that you can go to and expect them to answer a question. It's true the world over, man. In the business place, you've got your favorites. Too often that means that they probably get overworked, and the ones that aren't working as well get underworked. But getting back to subs, here's what happened in that situation. It's not that they had given me negative feedback, of course. It's that I didn't even have the opportunity to get in the door to try to get some feedback. So there was a teacher that goes to the church that I go to. She realized that I was starting to substitute teach, and she asked me, would you be willing to substitute for my class tomorrow? And of course I did. I saw her on a Sunday. So she sent me directly the substitute position opening. I accepted it, and around 6 o'clock that Sunday evening, all of a sudden, it says that job has dropped off. Now I'm thinking, well, now did my friend at church change her mind? So I waited a little while to see if anything else happened, and it didn't. So I gave her a call, and she said, it's funny. She saw it drop off and thought that I had changed my mind. Well, it turns out that they have a really good assistant in the office at this school, and they were the one that canceled the job because they had not yet used up all of the substitute teachers they normally call. So they had their favorite list they like to choose. They basically took the job away from me and was prepared to give it to somebody else. So this teacher called the assistant. Now, let me tell you before this is over, this assistant is now a good friend of mine. So it was just a matter of getting my foot in the door. So it's funny. They actually, as I recall, this was a half-day substitution. And when the lady called me, she said, Mr. Collins, I've talked to who you're signed up for. She said, I'd love to have you in here. It just so happens we've got a shortage tomorrow, and would you mind if I instead pulled you away from that half-day class and gave you a full-day class? And it was math too, so that worked out really well for me. Well, here's what happened feedback-wise. I got in there. The teachers liked me. Maybe they didn't come right out and say, here's your feedback, Mr. Collins, but I knew by the amount of calls I got from that school after that I was in good shape. This particular assistant liked to call subs, so there was a rare morning then that would go by that I didn't get a call from this assistant. Sometimes I'd already accepted a job from someone else, but for that reason, she knew that the teachers had given her good feedback about me. So I became one of the first substitutes she called. So I guess some of the feedback we receive is kind of blind. We don't know we received it, but we got to realize if we continue to get asked back, if the kids like it when we're there, if they're still getting their work done, guys, we're getting feedback. It may not always be apparent. It may not always be an attaboy. It's an invisible attaboy. You're doing well enough that they want you back over and over again. So to me, that might be the most important piece of feedback, the part of it that's hidden, that we realize is there once they continue to ask us to come back. And then I would say there's like the quick observational feedback, the catch you by surprise feedback. One time I was substituting for a lady who was going to use me for multiple days. She hadn't met me yet, and she was actually at a meeting in the school, or I can't remember if it was in the school or she was coming back before the end of the day, but regardless, she was there the next morning before she left for day 2 of that meeting, and she said, Mr. Collins, I'll have to say, the kids really like you. She said, sometimes I'm not sure that I like that. because it means maybe they're having too much fun. But I looked at their work and they all got their work done. So you accomplished getting their work done and them getting good support from you for the same time. So that's kind of what I would put in the category of surprise feedback. Maybe even the teacher wasn't planning on giving it to you, but because of what she heard and, the students had told her, then she gave me feedback in that regard. One other time, I was at a middle school and it was an English class, or maybe literature, I guess it was. Not my forte. I was okay at it, but there are definitely a lot of people out there that are better at it than me. But the project was to read an assignment to them and let them evaluate it, or let them take turns reading as well. And it just so happened there was a co-teacher in there that day. And before the day was over, the co-teacher had already contacted the teacher to tell the teacher, listen, you need to have this substitute back. I think he does a good job. That's unexpected feedback as well. So substitutes out there, I will say this before we get into a little bit more detail. Obviously, we've got to earn our feedback. We've got to take our position seriously. You cannot imagine how often I hear from kids saying that we're glad to have you back in here, Mr. Collins. The last sub, all they did was read their book in the chair and yelled at us if we ask a question. Now, that's probably not 100% true, but that is a perception things to the student. If you're not going to share personal stories and give them personal help on what they're doing, if you don't respect them, they're not going to respect you. You will get from those students and from the teachers what you give. So we got to get that out of the way right now. You can't expect feedback if you don't earn the feedback. So we've got all that behind us now. We are past talking about what we have to do to be able to earn feedback. If we're not doing that, if we're just kind of the bump on the log type substitute teacher, don't expect any feedback. The teacher is probably not even going to go to the trouble of giving you the negative feedback that maybe you need to hear. But we've got to earn our feedback, and let's talk a little bit now about what would be nice for teachers to do for us. I liked that the listener's email mentioned, what about a generic feedback form? And here is what I would suggest personally needs to be on there. I, of course, would love for you to suggest things too. You can do that on our Facebook page or just send me an email to gregcollinssubstitute@gmail.com. But let's talk about some things. Let's first of all talk about this feedback form. Here's what I think it should do. And this sounds kind of generic, some of it, but let's talk about what we would like to see on this feedback form. Now, I'll give you some advice, substitute teachers. If every time you substitute, you are constantly bringing up negative things that the students were doing, sometimes even if it's true, well, you're going to get labeled a little bit. I'm not saying make up positive things, but I am saying make sure if you're going to point out negative things, you're going to point out some positive things too, and vice versa. If you're the kind of guy, and this is more who I am, I'll leave positive feedback for the substitute teacher, but I will still leave a comment or two of what I wish this class could have done a little bit better, those types of things. You're going to get more feedback, and especially the type that one teacher will share with another teacher. You'll start to get that more as time moves on. So, generic feedback form, here's what I would suggest that would go on it. What did the substitute do well? And I would want that to be from all aspects. How did they leave the room? What feedback did we give the teacher? It goes both ways, correct? What feedback did they give the students? What did they do well from a standpoint of teaching them? How well did they share personal stories? This could be multi-part, all over the place. Now, as I go to some of the others, here's would be my suggestion. As a substitute teacher, I don't think I'm going to prepare a master list feedback form. In other words, one that I could hand to every teacher I substitute for. I think that's probably just a little bit more than the teacher is going to have time for. Teachers are busy. They might not be able to fill out a complete laundry list of what they can do for you. So I'm not sure that's the best strategy. I'm trying to think. I'm still a substitute teacher, but I've been teaching permanently all year while this COVID thing is going on. This is, by the way, Valentine's Day 2021 when this comes out. I don't think I would do that. And I'm not sure if my sub handed me that, I'd probably fill it out, but I'd probably go through it as fast as I can. So I think the good old face-to-face, one-on-one feedback works best. So what did the substitute teacher do well? What could the substitute teacher improve? Now, I'll be honest with you. I would put this in the same category as the way I treat students. If I have some information to share with the student of something I needed them improve on, I first will share, and this is life in general again, I first will share some of the positive things that I've noticed out of them. I've got one student right now that I have seen an enormous improvement from the beginning of the year. And I think it's because that even when I needed to challenge that student and have that student pick up some things knowledge-wise and try harder, I started with some motivation on what the student was already doing well. And now this student comes up to me all the time and says, "Is there something I can help you with, Mr. Collins?" Or, "Can I help this student?" Now, that doesn't happen very often because the student's a little bit on the timid side in that regard. But feedback is feedback, guys, whether it's to a student, from a student, to a teacher, from a teacher. Okay? Now, so we got what did the substitute teacher do well? What could the substitute teacher improve on? Then maybe the other generic thing we want on the feedback form, and I don't want teachers to cringe when I say that, but I am being totally honest in that feedback from students, reactions from students are just as important to me as reactions and feedback from teachers. Now, they take different forms. A lot of times students will say, "Well, I like Mr. Collins because," and then they will go on and tell the teacher what it's all about. So what was the kid's reaction? How do they feel about you? They're going to share that with their teacher. I'm going to tell you about one teacher, and I know this for a fact because the student that I sub for, another person that goes to church with me, he came up to me and said, "Hey, our teacher, she spends 5 minutes every morning following when a substitute teacher was there to ask about them." Guys, that's feedback. It's behind the scenes, but the students are giving the teacher feedback, and then the teacher gives us feedback by either telling us that or signing us up to do another class. So again, do your best. You're going to be faced with situations that are negative. If you fly off the handle, I'm not sure that's the best way to control it. If you control it seriously, but try to maybe turn it into a positive situation, you're going to get positive feedback. So just as important to me as teachers giving me feedback is what was the kid's reaction. And of course, the last thing that might be on a list is, did the work get done? If you were preparing a generic feedback form, you would want to know what you did well, what you could improve on, What could I do to deal with the kids better so that they get more out of the class? And did they get their work done? So to me, that's the four biggies. Always remember that you get what you give. I can safely say that there are teachers that I won't say that I don't enjoy subbing for. I'll say it on the flip side. There are teachers that I love subbing for more than some other teachers. There's not very many. There was not very many teachers that I'd put in a negative situation or a category. I know one substitute, great person, but a bit on the disorganized side. When I was substituting for them, a couple of teachers came in to try to get me started for that day, and they couldn't even tell what the teacher's notes were for the substitute teacher. So I would never give teacher feedback unless somebody just flat asked me to, but I would say, the teacher could probably be a little bit more organized, and substitute teachers don't want to feel lost, so maybe the teacher could have been more organized in that regard. But I would think that we get what we give. If we are a positive person, if we tell, and I'm not saying don't tell teachers something just to butter them up or just to kiss up, so to speak. Be sincere with the teacher. I enjoy teaching your class because sometimes it's the kids. Sometimes it's the organization of the teachers. Sometimes it's that the teacher is always friendly and invites you back. But all that is important to us. That direct feedback from students, man, that is so important to us. I will close with a story again about my very first day of substitute teaching. It was at a school where I had to teach science. The teacher is now a very good friend of mine. I did not know the teacher at that point in time. I had to teach molecules and atoms and all this other stuff that I'm not going to mention anything about because I'm going to end up saying something wrong and showing my lack of intelligence in that area. But the best thing I enjoyed, the best feedback I got was from both the kids and the teacher. The kids, it was right away. That afternoon, a couple of them told me, "Can we have you back as a substitute teacher someday?" Now, how could it get any better than that? To the point of even making me think, well, I just thought I came in there and I was being myself. What was it that the student saw? But then they told that to the teacher, and sure enough, I became one of the ones that teacher asked to come back most often. There's probably two teachers that I've substitute taught for more than any other than long-term type positions, and this person was one of them. So feedback is a great thing. Substitute teachers need to hear it. Teachers need to hear it. Teachers need to share it with us. We need to share it with them, and just as importantly, we need to give our students feedback, give them ways to keep them pumped up, give them ways to earn more attaboys, not just participation trophies, but sincerely they did well. So let's make sure we give them the feedback and let them know that they did well. So feedback is a beautiful thing. We need it. We grow from it. We get better from it. If you're listening and you're thinking, I don't really care what anybody else thinks about me, I'm just going to go and do my job. Well, this show wasn't for you today because it is important for all of us. We all like to hear feedback. We have to, maybe I'll close with this, we have to make sure when we hear negative feedback, but done in a constructive way, that we react correctly. Sometimes maybe we'll get our feelings hurt, but that will help us grow. Make sure that when you hear feedback that is meant to be constructive criticism, that we take it in that way and we correct what that situation is for the next time. So feedback is great. Teachers, we need to hear that from you. We hope that we can make sure that we do the best job for you. We know that our basic reward is that you're going to ask us back. But drop some feedback in there ever so often just so that we know that we're doing the job we're supposed to do. All right? You guys have a great week. My quarantine is over this week. I will be able to head back to the classroom if we can get around all the ice storms we're having in our area. So have a good week, and we'll see you on next week's episode of Substitute Teachers Lounge. Music provided by Ben Sound.